What are these doodles?
Garrett Townsend snatched the newspaper and shoved it in Denise Walker's face.
I want pain and bleeding milk yet.
He looked at the architects.
This filthy janitor wants to replace you.
They scoffed.
Make way for this brilliant architect.
He slammed the paper down.
My 6-year-old girl draws better.
Denise bowed her head.
I only draw during my break, sir.
Your break? I hired you to clean the toilets. You're making this place dirtier. Go back to your slums and rest. You're covered in bleach. Disgusting.
I understand, sir. This won't happen again.
He crumpled her drawing and threw it at her chest.
Pick it up if I see this again. You're finished.
Denise knelt down, picked it up.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
Garrett didn't know what he had just lost. When the truth came out, it ruined him. 3 months earlier, Atlanta, Georgia, downtown. Crestline Development Group occupied the top 12 floors of a glass and steel tower that reflected the morning sun like a monument to ambition. Polished marble in the lobby, silent elevators, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the architects inside feel like gods looking down on the city. Denise Walker arrived every morning at 5:45, before the sun, before the security guard finished his coffee, before a single architect set foot in the building. She came through the service entrance at the back, never the front. The front was for people who mattered. Her routine never changed. Vacuum the hallways on floors 9 through 12. Empty the trash bins, 46 of them. Wipe down the conference tables. Restock the bathrooms. Clean the coffee machines. Polish the glass doors until her own reflection disappeared. She had been doing this for 8 months. In that time, not one person on the design floor had learned her name. To them, she was the gray uniform that moved quietly in the background. A ghost with a mop. But Denise had a habit nobody noticed. Every morning, when she emptied the recycling bins near the design studio, she would pause. Her fingers would move through discarded printouts, blueprints, renderings, structural drafts, all printed on only one side. She took the blank-sided ones, folded them neatly, and slid them into the bottom shelf of her cleaning cart. Nobody ever asked her why. At 9:15, the building changed. That was when Garrett Townsend arrived. You could hear him before you saw him. His voice carried down the hallway like a man who believed silence was a waste of his presence. Expensive watch, tailored suit, shoes that clicked against the marble like a metronome counting his own importance. Garrett was the operations director of Crestline. He had held that title for 6 years, not because he was the most talented, but because he knew the right people. His father golfed with the former CEO. His college roommate sat on the board. His designs were ordinary, his instincts average, but his politics were flawless. He greeted only people who could promote him. Everyone else was furniture. He once told a junior architect in front of the entire team, "If you wanted to matter, you should have gone to a school that mattered." The junior architect was a black woman. She quit the following week. Nobody said a word. That was the culture at Crestline. Talent was secondary. Status was everything. And right now, status was under threat. Crestline had been shortlisted for the South Bank Renewal Project, a $10 million contract to design a sustainable housing complex in one of Atlanta's most underserved neighborhoods. The client was Victor Brennan, a billionaire developer who wanted something revolutionary, affordable, green, human. The design team had been working on proposals for 4 months. Every draft came back rejected, too generic, too corporate, too disconnected. Garrett ran every review meeting, and every meeting ended the same way, shouting, blame, and no solutions. The deadline was 8 weeks away, and the team had nothing. Meanwhile, long after everyone had gone home, a woman in a gray uniform stood alone in the 11th floor design studio. The lights were dimmed. The air conditioning hummed softly. Denise stood in front of a pinned-up rendering of Crestline's latest South Bank proposal. She tilted her head, studied it. Then she pulled a pencil from her pocket and a blank-sided printout from her cart. She began to draw. Not doodles, not scribbles. Clean, confident lines. A cross-section of a building, load-bearing walls, ventilation pathways. A passive cooling system using thermal chimneys instead of mechanical air conditioning. She drew for 11 minutes, folded the paper, tucked it into her pocket, and went back to mopping. Down the hall, a door was slightly open. Eleanor Hayes, senior principal architect, one of the few women to ever hold that title at Crestline, sat at her desk. She had seen everything through the glass. She said nothing. But she did not forget. At a small apartment across town, after her daughter Tasha had fallen asleep, Denise sat at the kitchen table and opened a worn leather portfolio from under her bed. Inside were dozens of drawings, precise, annotated, scaled. Months of work. On the wall behind her hung a framed diploma from Howard University School of Architecture. Next to it, a faded photograph of a man with kind eyes who would never come home again. Denise picked up her pencil, and she kept drawing. The break room incident was not the beginning. It was not even the worst of it. The pattern started 3 weeks after Denise was hired. Garrett had noticed her pausing at the recycling bins near the design studio, bending down, sorting through discarded printouts, folding certain pages and tucking them into her cart. He watched her for 2 days without saying a word. On the third day, he made his move. He walked up to her cart in the middle of the 10th floor hallway. Half a dozen staff members were passing between offices. He reached into the lower shelf, pulled out the folded papers, and held them up like evidence at a trial. "What are these?" Denise kept her voice even. "Just blank paper, sir. Printed on one side. I used the back for..." "For what?" He stepped closer. "Your little art projects?" He looked around the hallway, making sure every eye was on him. "Let me make something very clear. These belong to Crestline. Every single sheet. Even our garbage is worth more than whatever you were planning to do with it." He dropped the papers into the nearest bin. "Touch our things again, and I'll have you written up. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir. I understand." "Good." He looked her up and down, slowly, deliberately, the way a person inspects something they find unpleasant. "And fix your uniform. You look like you slept in it." He walked away without looking back. The 6 people in the hallway stared at the floor. Nobody spoke until he turned the corner. Eleanor Hayes was standing in the break room doorway with a cup of coffee. She had watched the entire exchange. She said nothing, but she remembered every word. 2 weeks later, it got worse. Denise had been sketching during her lunch break in the back corner of the break room, a cross-section of a passive ventilation system using thermal chimneys. Clean lines, precise annotations, measurements scaled to the millimeter. She was so absorbed that when she left to restock a supply closet, she forgot to take the drawing with her. When she came back, it was gone. It was on the corkboard. Garrett had pinned it under a sticky note written in thick red marker. "Employee Art Corner, our cleaning lady's masterpiece." By the next morning, more sticky notes had appeared around it. "Future CEO," with a smiley face. "Van Gogh of the mop bucket." "Somebody get this woman a hard hat." Each one a small knife wrapped in a joke. The drawing stayed on that board for 3 days. Staff walked past it every morning. Some laughed out loud. Some glanced sideways and looked away. Nobody took it down. Nobody said it was wrong. On the second day, Denise stopped in front of the board. She looked at her own work, surrounded by mockery. She reached up to pull it down. "Don't touch that." Garrett appeared behind her, coffee in hand, leaning against the doorframe. "That stays right where it is. Consider it a public service announcement. A reminder of what happens when people forget where they belong. Sir, it's just something I drew on my break, on my own time. Your time? He laughed softly. You don't have time. You have a schedule I gave you, and your schedule says clean, not create. He sipped his coffee. People like you should be grateful to walk through the service entrance of a building like this. Don't push your luck. He walked away. The drawing stayed. But one person did not laugh. A junior architect, quiet, new to the firm, stopped in front of the board that evening when the floor was empty. He studied the drawing for a long time. His eyes traced the ventilation pathways, the structural load calculations, the airflow arrows. His smile faded. He looked over his shoulder. Then he walked away without saying a word. The worst was still coming. The following week, Garrett called a department-wide meeting in the main conference room. 42 people filed in. He stood at the front, cycling through Crestline's rejected South Bank proposals on the projector screen, ripping each one apart with increasing frustration. Then he stopped, reached behind the podium, pulled out a single sheet of paper. Denise's ventilation drawing, the one from the corkboard. And now for our grand finale. He held it up and turned it slowly so everyone could see. I give you the work of our resident genius, our janitor. He paused. The laughter came on cue. The woman who cleans your toilets produced this. And honestly, it's about the same quality as what the rest of you have been giving me. The room laughed louder. Nervous laughter, but loud enough. Denise was standing at the back with her cleaning cart, waiting to clean after the meeting. Garrett looked directly at her, across 42 heads. Maybe I should fire all of you and let her take over. At least she works for minimum wage, cheaper, and equally useless. The entire room turned to look at her. Denise gripped the cart handle until her knuckles went white. She stared at the floor. She did not move. She did not breathe. After the meeting, she found the drawing crumpled in the trash by the conference room door. Someone had written across it in black marker, "Stay in your lane." That night, Denise sat alone at her kitchen table. Tasha had gone to bed hours ago. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. She opened the leather portfolio. Page after page, months of careful drawing, floor plans, elevations, structural details, ventilation systems, everything she had learned in 4 years at Howard, everything she had practiced for 14 years after, on the backs of discarded paper. She stared at the pages. Her hands trembled. For the first time, she considered closing the portfolio and sliding it back under the bed. Forever. Accepting that this was her life. The gray uniform, the gray walls, the gray silence of a woman who had stopped fighting. Then she looked up at the wall. The diploma. The faded photograph beside it. A man with kind eyes who used to sit across from her at this same table every night and say 4 words. Show me what you drew. Denise picked up her pencil. They can tear the paper. They can't tear what I know. She drew until the sun came up. It was Eleanor Hayes who broke the silence. She had been watching for weeks, not with pity, not with guilt, but with the quiet precision of a woman who had spent 30 years in a profession that did not want her either. She had seen the drawing on the corkboard before Garrett pinned his note to it, and she had recognized exactly what it was. She had survived this industry by knowing when to speak and when to watch, and right now, she was still watching. But after the department meeting, after 42 people laughed at a drawing that Eleanor knew was better than anything Crestline had produced in a year, she decided she had watched long enough. It was a Thursday evening, just past 8. The 11th floor was empty. Denise was vacuuming the design studio when Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Denise. Denise looked up. Her body went rigid. In 8 months at Crestline, not a single architect had spoken to her, let alone called her by name. Ma'am? Eleanor stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She sat on the edge of a drafting table. That drawing on the corkboard, the one Garrett turned into a joke. Denise's grip tightened on the vacuum handle. Here it comes, she thought. Another lecture, another reminder of her place. That was a passive cooling system, Eleanor said. Stack ventilation, using thermal chimneys to drive natural airflow through a multi-story residential structure. I've seen that approach in exactly 3 published papers in the last decade. All of them came out of MIT. Denise said absolutely nothing. You didn't learn that from cleaning offices. Eleanor's voice was calm, direct, no pity. Where did you study? A long silence. Denise looked at the floor, then at the door, then back at Eleanor. Something in the older woman's eyes told her this was not a trap. Howard University, she said quietly. Class of 2010. Top 5 in my cohort. Eleanor did not react with any surprise. She did not gasp or shake her head or say she was sorry. She simply nodded, the way one professional acknowledges another. I'd like to see more of your work. Denise hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse. The last time she had shown her work to someone with power, it had cost her everything. But something in Eleanor's stillness, the way she sat without rushing, without performing concern, made Denise reach for the bottom shelf of her cart. She pulled out the leather portfolio. She opened it on the drafting table and laid out 5 sheets. Not all of them, just 5. Enough to test whether this moment was real. Eleanor went quiet. She leaned forward. Her fingers hovered above the drawings without touching them, the way a person handles something fragile and valuable. She spread them across the table, one by one. A site plan with integrated green corridors. Modular housing units designed for rapid assembly. A rainwater capture system woven into the structural framework. A community garden layout connected to pedestrian pathways. And at the center, a complete passive energy system that made Crestline's South Bank proposals look like rough drafts. Denise. Eleanor's voice had changed, lower, serious. This isn't a sketch. This is a thesis. This is a career. It's just drawings, ma'am. No. It's the answer to a $10 million question that 40 architects on this floor have failed to solve for 4 months. Eleanor told her she needed to present this work. Denise shook her head immediately. I can't. I have Tasha to think about. I can't lose this job. You're worth more than this job. I was worth more at my last job, too. And a man named Lawrence Pemberton took my graduate designs, put his name on them, and when I refused to stay quiet, he made sure I never worked in architecture again. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. 3 firms, 3 rejections, same phone call from the same man. I became a maid because no one would let me be an architect. The studio was silent for a long time. Eleanor did not push. She stood, straightened the drawings, and said, "May I photograph 2 of these, just in case?" Denise looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. Just in case. Eleanor took the photos carefully. She placed the portfolio back in Denise's hands, and she left without another word. Something had shifted. Neither of them knew yet how far it would go. The deadline was now 2 weeks away, and Crestline was falling apart. Victor Brennan's preliminary review team had sent back their verdict on the firm's latest South Bank proposal in a single paragraph. The language was polite, the message was not. The design lacks connection to the community it claims to serve. We see no innovation, no vision, and no reason to continue this conversation. Garrett read the email 3 times. Then he called an emergency meeting and did what he always did when things went wrong. He blamed everyone else. 4 months, he said, pacing at the front of the conference room. 4 months and 26 people, and this is the best you can produce? A client worth $10 million just told us our work has no vision. No vision. He slammed his hand on the table. If this project falls through, I promise you, heads will roll. And they won't be mine. The junior architects stared at their laptops. Nobody spoke. Nobody offered a solution. The room smelled like fear and cold coffee. Morale on the design floor collapsed overnight. 2 junior staff members quietly updated their resumes. 1 senior designer requested a transfer. The South Bank project, the biggest contract Crestline had pursued in 3 years, was dying, and everyone knew it. Everyone except Eleanor Hayes. That same evening, Eleanor walked into Preston Collins' corner office on the 14th floor and closed the door behind her. She had never requested a private meeting with the CEO before. Preston noticed. She placed 2 printed photographs on his desk without explanation. Photographs of Denise's drawings. The site plan with green corridors and the passive ventilation system. Preston picked them up. He studied them for a long time. His expression shifted from curiosity to focus, to something Eleanor had not seen on his face in years. Excitement. Where did these come from? I've been consulting with an outside designer, Eleanor said carefully. Someone with a different perspective on the South Bank brief. This ventilation system alone could cut the project's energy costs by 1/3. He set the photos down and looked at her. Who is this person? Let me bring you more first. Then we'll talk about who. Preston leaned back in his chair. He was a careful man. 61 years old, built his career on measured decisions. But the drawings on his desk were not measured. They were brilliant, and he knew the difference. Bring me everything they have. Eleanor nodded and left. What she did not know was that Garrett had seen her enter Preston's office. He had been passing through the 14th floor on his way to a budget meeting, and he had stopped when he saw Eleanor's silhouette through the frosted glass of the CEO's door. Eleanor Hayes did not visit the 14th floor. Eleanor Hayes did not request private meetings. Something was wrong. He began asking questions, casual questions, dropped into conversations with junior staff like coins into a vending machine, waiting to see what fell out. Has Eleanor mentioned anything about South Bank to you? Is she working with anyone outside the team? Has anyone seen her stay late recently? Most people gave him nothing. But on the 3rd day, he got what he needed. 2 junior architects were talking in the stairwell, unaware that the door on the landing above was open. Did you hear? Eleanor's mystery designer is someone in the building. No way. Who? Nobody knows. But apparently the drawings are insane. Preston's already seen them. Garrett stood on the landing above, perfectly still. His jaw tightened. Someone in the building. Someone producing work that had reached the CEO before passing through him. He went to the break room corkboard. The employee art corner sticky note was still there, but the drawing beneath it was gone. Eleanor had removed it weeks ago. He stood in front of the empty corkboard for a long time. And then it hit him. Meanwhile, Eleanor came to Denise on a Tuesday night. She found her mopping the 9th floor bathroom and told her simply, "Preston Collins has seen your work. He wants more." Denise froze. The mop handle slipped in her wet hands. No, I told you, I can't. He doesn't know it's you, not yet. But he's ready to take this to Brennan. All he needs is a complete package. Eleanor, you don't understand. The last time I stepped forward, a man took everything from me. My work, my name, my career. I have nothing left to lose except this job, and this job keeps my daughter fed." Eleanor did not argue. She simply said, "Your daughter will grow up either way. The question is what she'll see when she looks at her mother." The words landed like a stone in still water. Denise said nothing for a long time. She looked at the mop in her hands. She looked at the fluorescent lights buzzing above her. She thought about Tasha sitting at the kitchen table, doing homework, asking about her day, believing her mother was fine. That night, after Tasha fell asleep, Denise did not open the portfolio. She sat at the kitchen table and stared at the tuition bill pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet. $1,400, due in 3 weeks. She stared at it until her vision blurred. Then she pulled out the portfolio. She worked until 4 in the morning. 3 new sheets, full elevations, a material specification summary, and a community integration diagram showing how the housing complex would connect to schools, transit, and public green space. Her best work. Precise. Complete. Undeniable. She gave them to Eleanor the next evening. Eleanor brought them to Preston within the hour. Preston studied them behind his closed office door for 40 minutes. Then he picked up his phone and called Victor Brennan's office directly. "I'd like to request an extended pitch meeting. We have something new, something worth your time." Brennan's assistant paused. Then, "Mr. Brennan will be available Friday at 10. Preston hung up. He looked at the drawings spread across his desk. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe Crestline might actually win this contract. 3 floors below, Garrett Townsend sat in his office with Denise Walker's employee file open on his screen. He had pulled it from HR that afternoon. He scrolled to the education field. It was blank. He stared at the empty screen. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "I need everything you can find on a woman named Denise Walker, Howard University, School of Architecture, and a man named Lawrence Pemberton." He hung up and leaned back in his chair. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. No, not her. Friday, 10 o'clock. The 11th floor conference room at Crestline Development Group. Victor Brennan arrived with 3 senior members of his development team. He was a tall man, unhurried, with the quiet authority of someone who had built a billion-dollar portfolio by listening more than he spoke. He shook Preston Collins' hand firmly and sat down without small talk. Preston stood at the front of the room. Eleanor Hayes sat to his left. Garrett Townsend sat to his right. Arms crossed, jaw set, watching Eleanor with the fixed attention of a man who knew something was coming, but did not yet know what. 8 other Crestline architects filled the remaining seats. The projector was on. The first slide glowed on the screen. Crestline's logo, above the words, "South Bank Renewal Project, Revised Proposal." Preston began the presentation. He walked through the site plan, the green corridor integration, the modular housing concept. Brennan leaned forward. His team began asking questions. "What's the load-bearing assumption on the modular frames?" Eleanor answered, confidently, correctly. "And the passive ventilation, what airflow rate are you projecting per residential unit?" Eleanor paused. The question was deeply specific. She knew the design, but she had not built it. She glanced toward the door. It opened. Denise Walker stepped into the conference room. She was not wearing her gray cleaning uniform. She wore a simple dark blazer, borrowed from Eleanor that morning, over a white blouse. Her hair was pulled back. She carried the leather portfolio in both hands, the way a person carries something they have protected for a very long time. The room went silent. Garrett's face drained of color. His hands, resting on the conference table, slowly curled into fists. Preston gestured to the whiteboard. "This is the designer behind the revised proposal." Denise walked to the front of the room. She set the portfolio on the table. She opened it, and then she began to speak. She answered the ventilation question first. Airflow rates calculated per square meter, adjusted for Atlanta's humidity index, driven by thermal chimney stacks positioned at 15-degree angles to maximize convective draw. She did not read from notes. She spoke from memory. Brennan's team asked another question, then another. Material stress tolerances for the modular frames. Assembly sequences for rapid construction. Community use zoning ratios that would satisfy both residential density requirements and public green space mandates. Denise answered every single one of them, not with hesitation, not with approximation, with the precision of someone who had spent 14 years thinking about these problems every night at a kitchen table while the rest of the world slept. Then she picked up a dry erase marker and turned to the whiteboard. She drew a supplementary cross-section diagram, freehand, perfectly to scale, showing how the rainwater capture system integrated into the structural framework of the modular units. She labeled each component without pausing once. Load paths, drainage gradients, material interfaces. The room was completely still. 8 architects who had failed to solve this problem for 4 months watched a woman they had never spoken to draw the answer on a whiteboard in under 2 minutes. Victor Brennan raised his hand to stop his own team's questions. He looked at Denise. "Where did you train?" "Howard University, sir, class of 2010. She paused. "And 14 years of drawing on the backs of things people threw away." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Garrett spoke. "With all due respect, Mr. Brennan." His voice was controlled, professional, a blade wrapped in courtesy. "This woman is a member of our cleaning staff. She holds no active architectural license. These drawings were never authorized or reviewed by the firm. Presenting unlicensed, unapproved work to a client of your caliber is a liability issue, and I want that on the record." The room shifted. Some board members looked uncomfortable. Brennan's expression did not change. Eleanor reached into the folder beside her. She pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper, wrinkled, flattened, with 2 words scrawled across it in black marker. "Stay in your lane." She placed it on the conference table. "This is the drawing you mocked in front of 42 people, Garrett. The one someone crumpled and threw in the trash with this message written on it." She smoothed it flat. "It's a passive thermal chimney system, and it's the centerpiece of the design that Mr. Brennan just called revolutionary." Every head in the room turned to Garrett, then to Denise, then back to Garrett. Nobody said a single word. The silence lasted 4 seconds. It felt like 40. Garrett was the first to move. He straightened his tie, leaned forward, and addressed the room with the calm precision of a man who had prepared for this moment. "Let me be very clear." His voice was steady, almost pleasant. "Denise Walker is employed by Crestline as a cleaning contractor. She signed an employment agreement. Under that agreement, any work produced on company premises using company resources is the intellectual property of the firm." He turned to Preston. "These drawings were made on discarded company printouts, in our break rooms, on our floors. That makes them ours." He reached for his phone. "I'm calling legal counsel. I recommend we pause this meeting until we've clarified ownership. Presenting unlicensed, unvetted work to a client of Mr. Brennan's caliber without legal review is grounds for malpractice." Preston hesitated. He looked at Brennan, whose expression had not changed. He looked at Eleanor, who sat very still. He looked at the drawings on the table, the best work anyone in his firm had produced in years, and felt the contract slipping through his fingers. "Garrett may have a point," Preston said slowly. "We should—" "No." The word came from Denise. Quiet, clear, final. Every head turned to her. She reached for the leather portfolio, not the 5 sheets already on the table, but the portfolio itself. She opened it fully for the first time. Inside were dozens of drawings. She began placing them on the table, one by one. Every drawing in this portfolio was created in my apartment, she said. On paper I purchased myself, on my own time, after my daughter went to sleep. She pointed to the corner of each sheet. Every page is dated and initialed. These go back 11 months. The row stretched across the entire length of the conference table. Drawing after drawing after drawing. Months of midnight work laid out under fluorescent lights for the first time. The sketches I made on company printouts were preliminary thumbnails, nothing more. The real work, the calculations, the elevations, the ventilation systems, the community plans, was done at home, on my own materials, with my own pencils, at a kitchen table after my daughter fell asleep. She reached into the portfolio one final time and placed 3 documents beside the drawings. A transcript from Howard University, School of Architecture, her name at the top, her GPA circled in pencil. An architectural license certificate, expired but bearing her full name and license number, verifiable through the state board. And a handwritten letter of recommendation from her thesis advisor, Professor Harold Whitmore, dated 2010, praising her as the most gifted structural thinker he had taught in 2 decades. I have carried these every single day for 14 years, she said. Not because I thought someone would ask, but because I needed to remind myself that they were real, that I was real. The room was absolutely still. Garrett stared at the documents. His phone was in his hand, but he had not dialed. He changed tactics. This is very moving. His voice softened into something almost sympathetic. But we need to talk about credibility. He set his phone down. Ms. Walker, isn't it true that you were previously employed by the architectural firm of Lawrence Pemberton and Associates? Denise's expression changed, a tightening around the eyes. A stillness that was different from composure. The stillness of someone bracing for a blow they had been waiting 14 years to receive. Yes, she said. And isn't it true that you were terminated for insubordination? That your exit review described you as, he glanced at his phone, difficult to manage, resistant to team structure, and unsuitable for collaborative professional work. The tremble started in Denise's fingers. It moved up through her hands and into her wrists. She pressed her palms flat against the table to stop it, but everyone in the room could see. This was the wound, the deepest one. The lie that Lawrence Pemberton had written in a file and sealed with a phone call. The same lie that had followed her across 3 firms, 3 interviews, 3 rejection letters, closing every door before she could knock. That is what the file says, she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But that is not what happened. With respect, the file is the file, and I think Mr. Brennan deserves to know that the person presenting this work has a documented history of Garrett. Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a knife laid flat on glass. I know exactly what Lawrence Pemberton did. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Eleanor stood. She opened a thin manila folder that had been sitting beneath her notepad the entire meeting and pulled out a single printed page. She placed it on the table beside the crumpled "Stay in Your Lane" drawing. 7 years ago, I served on an internal review board for the American Institute of Architects. Lawrence Pemberton was flagged for uncredited appropriation of junior designers' work. 2 complaints were filed, one by a black woman, one by a Latina woman. Both described the same pattern. He took their designs, presented them as his own, and when they objected, he terminated them and buried false reviews in their files to make sure they would never be believed. She paused. The room did not breathe. The review was suppressed, The complaints were sealed, but I kept my copy. She tapped the page. This summary names Pemberton, describes the pattern, and identifies the women whose careers he destroyed. She looked directly at Garrett. One of those women is standing in this room right now. Garrett's face went white. He had not known this existed. The phone call he had made, the background information he had gathered, suddenly looked like exactly what it was. A weapon, borrowed from a man already caught using it on the defenseless. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Victor Brennan spoke. He had been watching without moving, hands folded on the table. Now he leaned forward slowly and addressed Preston directly. Mr. Collins, I came to Atlanta looking for a firm that could design something meaningful for a community that has been overlooked for 30 years. A community where people work 2 jobs, raise children alone, and go to sleep every night in buildings that were never designed with them in mind. His eyes moved to Denise. I wanted a designer who understood that reality. Not from a textbook, not from a case study, from life. From waking up every morning in the kind of neighborhood this project is meant to serve. He held her gaze. I believe I have found that person. He turned back to Preston. The question is not whether Ms. Walker's work is extraordinary. It is. The question is whether your firm deserves to have its name attached to it. Because from where I am sitting, I see a company that let the most talented person in the building scrub its toilets for 8 months, while 40 architects produced nothing. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Preston Collins stood, slowly. He looked at the row of drawings stretched across the table. Months of solitary work, years of accumulated knowledge, a lifetime of suppressed talent laid out in pencil and paper by a woman the world had told to stop trying. He looked at the crumpled drawing with "Stay in your lane" scrawled across it in black marker. He looked at Denise, still standing at the whiteboard, dry erase marker in hand, waiting the way she had waited for 14 years. He straightened his jacket. Ms. Walker, his voice was thick, I owe you an apology. This firm owes you a profound apology. He took a breath. And I would like to offer you a position, not in facilities, not as a consultant, on this project, as lead designer. The entire room exhaled as one. Victor Brennan nodded, a single, slow, decisive motion. Eleanor closed her eyes. Just for a moment. 30 years navigating this industry, and this was the first time she had seen it bend towards something that looked like justice. Denise's hands, gripping the edge of the portfolio since she walked through that door, slowly released. Her fingers uncurled one by one. She looked down at her own drawings. Months of silent, stubborn, furious hope, spread across a table where people had once laughed at her name. Her eyes glistened. She pressed her lips together. Held. She nodded. I accept. 2 words. 14 years in the making. At the far end of the table, Garrett Townsend stood. He buttoned his jacket with deliberate hands. He looked around the room for someone, anyone, who would meet his eyes. Nobody did. He walked out of the room without a word. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And not a single person in that room watched him go. After the room cleared, Victor Brennan stayed behind. He stood across the table from Denise, the drawing still spread between them. He picked up the passive ventilation diagram and studied it the way a collector studies a painting he has spent years searching for. This system alone could reduce the project's energy costs by 35%. That single detail sold me. He set the drawing down. I reviewed proposals from 11 firms across 4 states. None came close to what you built at a kitchen table. He signed a letter of intent before leaving the building. The contract value? $10.2 million. One condition: Denise Walker would serve as lead designer. Non-negotiable. Preston Collins walked Denise to her new office personally. They took the elevator to the 11th floor, the design studio, the same room she had vacuumed every morning for 8 months, the same drafting tables she had wiped down in silence, the same windows she had polished until her own reflection disappeared. Now, there was a nameplate being ordered for the door. "Your licensing reinstatement will be fast-tracked," Preston said. "The firm's legal team will handle everything." He paused in the doorway. "I should have seen you sooner." Denise nodded, but said nothing. Some apologies arrived too late to answer and too important to refuse. Eleanor found her alone in the office 10 minutes later. Afternoon light fell across the drafting table where the portfolio now sat open, catching the sun for the first time. "You were ready the whole time," Eleanor said. "You just needed someone to open the door." Denise looked at her. "No, I needed someone to stop locking it." They stood together in the quiet. Then Eleanor squeezed her shoulder and left. That evening, Denise came home early for the first time in months. Tasha was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up and knew immediately that something had changed. "Mom? What happened?" Denise sat down across from her. She told her everything. Tasha cried. Then she wiped her eyes and said, "Can I see the drawings?" Denise pulled out the leather portfolio. She opened it between them on the kitchen table. And for the first time in 14 years, she did not draw alone. 6 months later, the South Bank renewal project was ahead of schedule. Denise Walker sat at the head of a drafting table on the 11th floor of Crestline Development Group. The same floor, the same room, the same windows. But nothing was the same. 8 architects reported to her now. They called her by name. They asked her opinion before making decisions. They listened when she spoke. The modular housing concept she had designed at her kitchen table was being built. Steel frames were rising from the red Georgia clay on the south side of Atlanta. And every beam, every joint, every angle followed the lines she had drawn on the backs of paper nobody wanted. Her architectural license had been reinstated, with the full support of Crestline's legal team. The process took 11 weeks. When the new certificate arrived in the mail, clean, official, bearing her name in crisp black ink, she held it for a long time before placing it on the wall beside the old one from Howard. She was invited to deliver the commencement address at Howard University's School of Architecture that spring. She said yes without hesitation. She owed that place everything. The project drew attention beyond Atlanta. A national architecture publication featured the South Bank design, calling it one of the most innovative affordable housing concepts in a decade. They did not mention that its designer had been mopping floors 8 months earlier. Denise did not mind. The work spoke for itself. It always had. Garrett Townsend's departure from Crestline was quiet. There was no dramatic firing, no public humiliation. That would have been too easy. What happened was slower and more thorough. After the Brennan meeting, Preston Collins initiated a formal review of Garrett's management conduct. Complaints surfaced, not just about Denise, but from junior architects who had endured years of credit-taking, intimidation, and suppression of talent. 3 written statements, 2 formal grievances that had been filed and ignored. A pattern that everyone knew about and no one had been willing to name out loud. Garrett was offered a lateral transfer to Crestline's regional office in Savannah. On paper, a reassignment. In practice, a demotion. Smaller office, smaller team, no client-facing authority. He accepted without protest. He packed his desk on a Wednesday afternoon while the 11th floor was in a design review. Nobody said goodbye. He was not destroyed. He was diminished. And for a man who had built his entire identity on being the most important person in every room, that was worse. On the wall behind Denise's desk, a single framed object hung between her two diplomas. It was a crumpled sheet of paper, flattened and pressed behind glass, with two words scrawled across it in black marker: "Stay in your lane." Junior architects who visited her office always noticed it. When they asked, Denise would look at the frame and say the same thing every time. "Someone told me this was worthless. I keep it to remember that the people who tear things down are never the ones who know how to build." On the opposite wall, pinned to a corkboard with a single thumbtack, was a photograph. Tasha, 15 years old now, smiling, wearing safety goggles, standing at a drafting table in a weekend architecture workshop for teenagers. She was holding up a rough sketch of a building. Unfinished. Imperfect. A beginning. 300 miles north, Lawrence Pemberton's name was quietly removed from two professional industry boards, following a formal review of Eleanor Hayes's documentation. No courtroom, no headlines, just accountability, arriving the way it always does. Late, but certain. Denise Walker's story is not about architecture. It is not about a $10 million contract or a glass tower in Atlanta or a man who tore up a drawing he was too blind to read. It is about what happens when we let a uniform decide who matters. Every day, in every city, in every country, there are people carrying extraordinary talent in quiet hands. They drive buses. They stock shelves. They mop floors, they wash dishes in the backs of restaurants while customers complain about the service. They carry genius inside them like a secret they have stopped trying to tell. Because every time they tried, someone laughed. The cost of that laughter is not measured in hurt feelings. It is measured in buildings never built, problems never solved, innovations that died in silence. Because the person with the answer was wearing the wrong uniform, living in the wrong neighborhood, or carrying the wrong color of skin. Garrett Townsend did not lose his career because he was cruel. He lost it because he was certain that a cleaning woman could not think, that talent came with a title, that people like Denise had nothing to offer the world except labor. That certainty almost cost his company $10 million. And it cost Denise Walker 14 years of her life. How many Denise Walkers are out there right now? How many people are drawing blueprints on the backs of discarded paper, waiting for just one person to look? If you know someone who has been told they are not enough, share this story with them. If you believe the quiet ones deserve to be heard, subscribe to this channel. Stay with us. There are more stories coming, and they need your voice. Hashtag Denise Walker. Hashtag Talent has no uniform. Hashtag Black Excellence. Hashtag Stay in your lane.
Can I be real with you for a second? What someone does for a living is not what they're capable of. The person mopping your floor might be the most brilliant mind in the building. The person emptying your trash might be carrying the answers to the problems you've been feeling for months. You just never asked. You never looked. You saw the uniform and decided what was the whole story. And to the person wearing that uniform right now, the one who's been drawing, writing, building, creating in secret because the world told you to stop. Don't stop. Keep the pencil moving. Keep the notebook full. Keep learning. Keep sharpening. Keep going. Even if it's on the backs of the paper nobody wants. At the kitchen table after your kids fall asleep. Because what you know doesn't disappear just because the world refuses to see it. It's still there, and one day someone will look. But don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, return. Keep your own proof. Carry your own receipts. Because when your moment comes, and it will come, You need to be ready to lay it all on the table and let the work speak for itself. Like, share and subscribe to stories. Do justice every week. And remember, the people who tear things down are never the ones who know how to build. Keep building.